Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make some raspberry white chocolate chip muffins using some sourdough discard. We're going to make up a new batch of granola bars and we're going to use some of our leftover ham from Easter to make some ham and cheddar melts. So first we're going to start by toasting up our oats for our granola bars. You really want to toast them up because it really lets out their flavor, gets kind of rid of that raw oat flavor. So we're going to put about 3 cups of oats on our baking sheet here. I have it lined with parchment paper. That way it will be easy for me to dump into the bowl. And these are just good old fashioned oats, but you could also use quick oats if you wanted to. We're going to just spread these out. And then I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees because that's what we're going to be cooking our muffins on. So I'm just going to take these over there and we're going to put them in real quick and just let them toast up. And again, that is just going to let their natural flavors come out and also get rid of that kind of raw oat flavor that's on it. So we're just going to pop these in. And we're going to let those toast up for about 5 or so minutes. Hopefully we'll have our muffins done. And when we put our muffins in, we can take that out. Okay, let's get on to our sourdough muffins. So we're going to start by doing the liquid base. Let me grab one of my sourdough starters. We're going to feed these up afterwards because we are going to be making some homemade sourdough bread tonight. Let me grab my long spatula. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to give it a little stir. We are going to start out with half a cup of sourdough discard. And again, this is going to be, we're going to be making our raspberry white chocolate chip muffins. I have a bunch of raspberries that I need to use up. Apparently, I just kept buying them and didn't realize I had like a couple in the back of my fridge. So we want to use those up before they go bad. So I've got a half a cup of sourdough discard. Put it in here, and it doesn't need to be active. And then we need to add in our melted butter. This is 1 stick of melted butter or a half a cup. Give it a nice stir. And forgot to grab my cream out of the fridge, so let me go grab my cream right here. And we need 1/4 of a cup of cream. I grabbed my sour cream, but not my cream. There we go. And I'm using heavy cream. You could use half and half, but again, I feel like the fuller fat leads to just a much better baked product. There we go. And then we're going to do 3/4 a cup of sour cream. And I am just going to eyeball it because I think it's such a pain to try to put the sour cream in a measuring cup. And this recipe is pretty forgiving. So if you're off by a little bit, it's not so bad. But 3/4 of a cup. So that's about half. And there we go. So that should be close to 3/4 of a cup. And now we're just going to mix all of these wet ingredients together. And then we'll add in our eggs and vanilla for our raspberry white chocolate chip sourdough muffins. And then we have our oats toasting up in the oven right now for our homemade granola bars, since my daughter loves those in her lunch during the week and as a snack. And we're going to make some ham melts using leftover ham from Easter dinner. Okay. So we've got that mix. We're going to add in 2 eggs and a tablespoon of vanilla. So 1 and 2.
Yeah, question, did everyone like the lamb lollies last
Oh,
night?
yes. So out of that huge tray, we only had 4 lamb lollies left. So I told you they were a hit. My daughter, she's like she's like 5'5" and like 110 pounds, super athletic. Cindy, she ate 5 whole lamb lollies. I was surprised how many she packed away. but she absolutely loves them. She's the one who always asks for steak every day. She's like, can we have steak? Can we have steak? And I'm like, no, we cannot eat steak every day. How about filet mignon? No, we cannot eat filet mignon every day. Okay, so we've got our eggs mixed in here, and now we're going to add in a tablespoon of vanilla extract. We're going to give this a good stir. There. I was deciding whether to do, I was like, oh, I need to use raspberries. So I was whether I wanted to do a lemon raspberry muffin, but we just made lemon rolls. And so I was like, oh, let's do a white chocolate chip. That just sounds so delicious. I feel like white chocolate chips and white chocolate goes well with raspberry. Okay, we've got our vanilla in. Now we are going to add 2 teaspoons of baking powder and or a half a teaspoon of baking soda. So finally got myself a new baking powder. I was tired of mixing it myself. So grab one of those up. So 2 of baking powder and then a half of baking soda. And then we're going to put in a teaspoon of salt. So here's a half of baking soda and 1 teaspoon of salt. There we go. We're going to give this a good stir. We want to make sure that baking soda and baking powder really gets mixed up in here. That's going to be the rising agent, with the eggs in our thing. So I don't like to take the time to sift it into my flour. So as long as it gets really mixed up well into my wet ingredients, it does just fine. Okay. And perfect. Now we're going to add in 1 cup of granulated sugar or white sugar. And this is going to give the sweetness for the muffins, as long with those little white chocolate chips we're going to put in. We're going to give this a good stir because this is where you can get your stirring to happen. Once we add in the flour, you really want to minimize the amount of stirring you do because the more you mix it, you're going to get a stiffer muffin. So you want to make sure you minimize that so you have a nice chunky lumpy muffin dough. It's kind of like with cookies. When you cream them, you're going to get that nice chewy cookie, which is great in a cookie. But we do not want that in our muffin. So we're going to put in 2 cups of all-purpose flour. There we go. And now we're going to just stir this in. We're going to have a nice kind of chunky batter, which is what we want. So resist the urge to mix it then. That's why I always say just use a spatula. You don't need to get a hand mixer out for this because it's really easy to over mix it with a hand mixer. So just use it in here and you're going to mix it until it's just incorporated because then we're going to fold in some of our raspberries and our white chocolate chips. So you see how we've got this kind of chunky batter where the flour is just barely mixed. This is perfect. Okay. Now we have about, I'm going to say, about 3/4 of a cup of raspberries. You don't want to go too crazy on them because there is a lot of liquid in raspberries. And if you put too many, then you get more of a soggy one. And then we're going to do about 3/4 a cup of white chocolate chips. So that's about there you go. And then we're just going to gently fold these in to our muffin mix. And just be careful. You don't want to over mix them too hard because that will cause the raspberries to break up, which isn't the end of the world. But to get those nice, like super pretty pops of color, you just want to mix them very gently. There we go. And when I was picking out my raspberries, I was trying to pick out the firmest ones because they'll hold their shape the best in the muffins. But here we have folded in our delicious raspberries and white chocolate chips. So we are going to scoop them into our muffin tin and then we will bake them up. And I do have my oven preheated on 400. So when we go over there, we will take our oats out for our granola bars. There we go. Putting in my liners. I'm trying to go through all of my random liners that I have. I have so many like small batches of liners, but I'm almost down, and then I'm going to buy some new ones. These are like little Swedish ones. They're not like full on Christmas kind of, but they always have what I like think of as Christmas with Swedish, which has the Dala Hestas on it, which is the Swedish horse. But that's not actually a Christmas like decoration. It's just a decoration from the Dala part of Sweden. But growing up, I always just associated it with Christmas because that's when my mom would bring out all of her Swedish decorations. So we're going to scoop in our muffin mix into each one of these things. We're going to fill it up nice and thick to the top because I like big domes on my muffins. Gives you that nice bakery look. So we'll go back over and refill it up. Here we go. But I will say the white chocolate chips add a little extra sweetness, where I find raspberries, are a bit more tart, and they just work really well together. Now, so when we made our strawberry muffins like a week or two ago, I coated the strawberries with some cornstarch to help kind of thicken them up when they were thin. You don't have to do that with raspberries because they aren't they're not as juicy as a strawberry. So you don't have to worry about them sweating too much into it. Let's go back and we're going to really fill up these domes. Now, since we used butter in our batter, we have a much thicker batter, but as the butter melts in the oven, these won't overflow. They'll just have a nice pop of a dome on the top. Here we go. Kind of scoop up and make sure I get the rest of it all in here. And this batter, it makes about a dozen. If you wanted to make smaller muffins, like not fill them up all the way, you could probably stretch it to like a dozen and a half, 18. But I find this is perfect for our family. We're a large family, so these will last about 1 to 2 days of everyone getting one. And then a few lucky will get a second one. Okay. Last of it, and get all these. Don't want any of those chocolate chips to go to waste. Okay. Let's go put these in the oven. So, and then while we're over there, we'll take out our oats. These are going to cook in our oven at 400 for 18 minutes. I find the higher thing leads for a nicer muffin. Let me slide that right there. Perfect. We've got our oats nice and toasted here. I'm going to remember to set my timer. I've forgotten a couple of times, and that has been no good. I'm always like, oh, when are we going to give these a nice shake? You can kind of smell the toasty smell of them. So what I'm going to do is, because I want these to cool off quicker than if I were to leave them straight on the baking tray. And this is why it's nice to have the parchment paper, is we're going to kind of put it all in here. And then I'm going to carefully, at least try my best, to bring this all in here so we can then just pour it in there. Perfect. And this is, I will say, this is a crucial part for your granola bars, because otherwise your granola, the bars, they taste like raw oats if you don't toast them up. So it's really, really important to do this toasting. It doesn't take much time, but it adds a lot to the flavor. Get that in there. Okay. We're going to let those, give them a shake. That will just help them cool down a little bit faster. And then before we start our grilled cheeses or our ham and cheddars, I am going to start making the kind of the sticky syrup that we're going to pour on our granola bars. And that we're going to use 3/4 of a stick of butter. Let me grab a knife over here. And you could use coconut oil or whatnot, but I find butter just works really well for these. So it's about 6 tablespoons of butter. Open this. We're going to have it melt, and then we're going to add in about a half a cup of honey and about a half a cup of brown sugar. And that's going to be the sticky base for our granola bars. Now, these aren't exactly like, you know, the chewy granola bars you can get. These have more of a honey flavor to them. So if you don't like honey, you could switch it out and then just use like corn syrup or agave syrup if you didn't like the honey flavor. My kids love honey, so they don't mind it at all. They actually love it. They'll eat straight up honey. You know, when they were younger, we would go to the farmer's market, and there was always like a little stand that had the little honey straws that you could buy, and that was the kids' favorite thing, is picking out the honey straws, and then there are the flavor ones. And they all got to pick out, like they could get 4 for $1, so they all got to pick it out. So we're going to do about a half a cup of honey, which I'm going to use the rest of this bottle and then a little bit more. And you want to heat this on low, and we're going to until all the brown sugar has dissolved, and then when we get a light little boil on it. You don't want to boil it too long to where then your granola bars get really crunchy for it. You want them to have a nice chewy thing. So there we go. So that is, we're going to add a little bit more on there because that wasn't quite a half a cup. We're also going to be adding 3 cups of Rice Krispies to our granola bar, so it's not just the 3 cups of oats. There we go. I'm going to get a little spoon here. We'll give it a nice little stir. Kind of break up the brown sugar in here. But essentially, you're just turning that honey and that brown sugar into kind of a sticky sauce that will hold everything together. But you want to, you know, we're not making like a lollipop, so you don't want to cook it so much that when it cools, it crystallizes. And then I'm just going to turn it down a little bit because I'd like to go low and slow. Here. We're going to let that butter melt up. And then we're going to work on our delicious melts. I'm just going to get my spoon rest out because this is going to be very sticky. Okay, let me give these another shake. This is the quickest way to kind of get them to cool off, because we're going to be putting M&Ms and mini chocolate chips in. So you want it to kind of cool off just a little bit. They're not too hot. Okay. So we're using up our sourdough that we cooked up. I think like 2 to 3 days ago. So we've got a little bits of it left. The fruity cherry, lemon, cranberry sourdough is all gone. That was a hit between, well, I will say it was a hit between Jack, my 18-month-old. He absolutely loved it. And then my mom and I, we loved it. It was so good. The lemon zest in it just made it just so like a nice, really bright, happy bread. And then, of course, the cranberries and the cherries. It's always surprising how just a little, like we didn't add any extra sugar to our sourdough when we made it, but the dried cranberries and the dried cherry and the lemon zest made it seem like a nice, sweet bread. But here's our traditional, our pretty basic loaf. Nice. We have a nice crumb on it. Look, you got the nice little ridge on our expansion ridge. Okay, let's put a little bit of room temperature butter on each side. I'm going to find my flattest sides so that there's no, if you have a ridge on it, it's not going to toast up well.
You have a question? Do you know what loaves you're going to make tonight?
I'll make another traditional one. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna, unless I decide to do 2 fancy loaves. I have a bunch of fresh sage growing out in my garden right now, so I think I might do a savory one with sage, but I'm not 100% sure exactly. Like I might do a caramelized onion and sage loaf, but again, not sure yet. It's whatever kind of moves me tonight. You know, that's what I always sit there. People are like, "Oh, do you know what you're having for dinner?" And I'm like, "Have no idea what I'm having for dinner." You know, once we get closer to the dinner time, I'll figure it out. Although I did pick up some lovely flounder, so I might do that for dinner tonight. Especially since we had like heavy dinners the last 2 nights with, you know, we had our 2 little Easter dinner nights, that maybe a nice something a little lighter fare. So maybe flounder might be on the menu. We're going to put a little bit of mustard, some bougie Grey Poupon. I know, I thought I had bought an extra one of these, but I must have. It's probably sitting in some random spot. Okay, so let me give it. We have just a little bit of mustard on it. I find that I'm not a huge mustard fan, but I do find that it actually like pairs so well with the ham and the cheddar. Just gives you an extra little savory thing, but you don't want to go overkill with it. Where did I put my cheddar cheese? It's right in front of me. So doing just the good old classic ham and cheddar melt. So we're going to use some sharp cheddar, and we're going to put it on here. But I see mine getting a little boil over here, so we're going to give it a nice stir. This is our honey and our brown sugar and our butter. We're going to just let it, oh, apparently I squished it over too much. I want to get that quickly because the sugar in it, if you don't clean it up right away, that sugar will like caramelize on your thing and it will be awful to clean up. Okay. There we go. We've got a nice little boil to it. We're going to let it sit for about 1 more minute. Once you get a boil on it, you want to do it for about 1 minute. And I'm going to watch it, make sure it doesn't bubble over. But that's about the time it's going to get to the right stickiness. Now, if you wanted to get technical, you could get like a candy thermometer out and do all of that. But I just look at the visual cues for it. So this is when I know it's about ready. Do you see how it's starting to get a little bit foamier at the top? That is where we want to remove it from the heat. So I'm going to turn it off, and then you want to completely remove it from the heat. So just slide it away from your burner and just let it sit for a little bit. Because if you keep it on your burner, it still has a lot more residual heat and it will continue to boil over. Okay, so we had delicious honey or like a brown sugar glazed ham for Easter. And so now we're going to use, I'm always finding out ways to reuse some of our leftovers. So we're going to use this to make our delicious sandwiches. I'm just going to kind of cut off any of those chewier crusts on the outside simply because they're not as nice on the sandwich. But I will say this ham was so good. It just beats like a store-bought ham, you know, for making sandwiches, like leftover ham is just so delicious. It's more tender. But if anyone had made up a lot of ham, this is a great way to do like quick lunches that are a bit different than just reheating the ham slices. I think I'm also going to make a soup with it later this week, like a ham and potato soup or maybe a 7-bean soup. Okay, we've got our little things, and then we're going to do our last little layer of cheese on here. And you could even change it up if I did ham and cheddar, but you could also do the classic like ham and Swiss. And then we're going to put ours on, and I'm just going to turn my burner going here. Now let's get over to our granola. Let's see how it's feeling. It's getting there. Okay, now that we've got it off the burner, we're going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla to it. And then we're going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And that's going to just give it gives you an extra thing. I find if you don't add salt to your baked goods, sometimes they just feel a little bit too sweet. And with the honey and the brown sugar here, the salt kind of cuts through that flavor. Here we go. We're just going to let that cool. While we're waiting, we're going to measure in 3 more cups of Rice Krispies. Let me grab. That one's full of Sourdough Discard. Here we go. So I like to do half and half. It's kind of like, you know, the chewy granola bars have Rice Krispies in them. I don't remember them ever having Rice Krispies in them when I was a kid. I feel like it's just a way to make them cheaper now. But I do like the crunch that the Rice Krispies do, and they make them less dense. So that's 2 and 3. And let me get a spatula. We're going to give this a quick little toss. That will hopefully help cool those oats down as well. And then before we actually mix everything into them, we're going to feed our starter so that we can make sourdough bread tonight. So anytime you make sourdough, you have to have an active starter. I like to have it fed within, 4 to 8 hours of making it. So we are going to feed this guy, and so we can make some bread from him. So you want to use unbleached flour, and then you're going to give it equal parts flour and water. So I'm going to give it 10 tablespoons of flour, and then we'll give it 10 tablespoons of water. And I am going to count, hopefully with my fingers accurately. But I have a record of not being accurate. But luckily, is that 10? No, that was 9. There we go. I know I had this one and I was like, oh, is that one up or not? Yeah, not very good at this. It's the multicasting and counting of one-to-one correspondence. And then we're going to do 10 tablespoons of water, which is going to be 150 milliliters. Grabbing my little spatula here. You know, you could fill up your little scoop and try to do it that way, but I find a lot of times you get pockets in your flour, your little cup when you're doing that. So I just do the 10 scoop. I always have a tablespoon measurer in there. And if I'm just feeding it and I've used a lot or I haven't used very much, I might only do 5 and 5. There we go. Now we're going to give this a nice stir. And hopefully, as long as your starter is nice and good, it will be nice and bubbly. It will grow in size, and that it will be ready to rise the bread. It's got to be nice and active. You've got to feed it before. Otherwise, you're going to get a dense lump of dough that will be gummy when you bake it up. So it's important to feed it. I always find if I feed it during lunchtime, then at dinner time, I can make up my loaves for the following day because I like to do a nice long cold proof. And that always seems to give me the best bread. So we've got ours mixed up here. And then we're going to put our lid back on. So we'll use this guy for our bread tonight. Let's see if these are nice and melted. Okay, we've got them melted. We're going to, hopefully our skillet's nice and warm. We're going to have them start crisping up and we'll do our browning. But first is to really just warm up the bread and to have it nice and melted. Okay, let's pour in. This is our honey and brown sugar and butter. Make sure we did add vanilla and salt to it. So we're just going to pour that all the way in there. We're going to stir it up. There we go. Want to make sure you coat everything. Once we get it stirred up well, then we're going to add in our little special stuff. We're going to do mini M&Ms, and then we'll do chocolate chips. The chocolate chips will probably melt, but they still taste delicious in it. Now, you could always wait like a while for it to cool down, but I find the melted chocolate chips actually just add a nice texture to it. There we go. So we've got these mixed up. So here's our nice base for our granola bars. The M&Ms will keep their shape and form. The chocolate will melt into it, but it will be delicious. So we're going to add about, I want to say like half a cup of mini chocolate chips. So, and then we're going to add the same amount with the mini M&Ms. And I find mini M&Ms work better than full because they're just, the full ones are like too hard and crunchy for the granola bars. So that's a fourth. That's about a half. We're going to mix them in here. There we go. You know, I'm add maybe a bit more M&Ms. There you go. You want to just have I always look to see what I have visually in there. Perfect. And these are our delicious granola bars. We'll press them out. Let's do our flip. I think we've got a nice light brown. Okay, now we're going to be toasting them up each side for the nice golden crust. But the reason we do multiple flips is you want to warm up that bread so that cheese and everything can start to melt. Okay. Ooh. Before we start this, our muffins are beeping at us. So we'll go get those. Here we go. So these are our raspberry white chocolate chip muffins using our sourdough discard. There we go. Perfect. You can see how beautiful they look, the chunks of raspberries and the white chocolate chips. They'll blend together for that nice tart yet sweet deliciousness for them. And I'm going to put them on a thing to cool. But again, we made these with our sourdough discard for them. So it was a half a cup of sourdough discard for the 12 muffins, and it gives a nice little tart flavor that pairs well with the white chocolate chips and the raspberries. And then of course, when we filled them up all the way at the top, it gives us this lovely bakery dome on our muffins. Again, these are our beautiful white chocolate chip raspberry muffins. Okay. Let's get our granola bars out. So I've got a 9x13 dish. We're going to coat it with some nonstick cooking spray. This will allow the granola bars to flip out when they've cooled and set so that they don't stick. So you just want to give it a good spray. And that's really important because you don't want to have them stuck to the bottom of your pan. Now, I'm just going to push these out. Spread them here. Get it all out. And these take about an hour to fully set because you have to wait for all of that stuff to cool down, and then it will come together where you can easily chop them with like a sharp knife into bars. But here, we've got them in there, and we're going to do a press down in just a second, but I'm going to flip our grilled cheeses first, and then we're going to press it down to a nice flat. Oh, look at that beautiful golden brown. Perfect. Okay. Now we're going to grab a piece of parchment paper, or you could use wax paper, but this is the best way to push them down. You need to push it's just like with Rice Krispie treats, you need to push them down. That's going to help them stick together when you cut them out. So we're just going to put it over the top, and then you're going to firmly push it down and keep it there. Otherwise, what will happen is they'll fall apart. So you need to close up any of those air gaps in there to have a nice compact bar. And I find the best way to do this is with some parchment paper or wax paper, but something that it won't stick to you, but you can really firmly push down. There we go. And then you see how much nicer they look? Like we're gonna have one perfect thing. So I'm gonna just push these two down You just want to make sure that way you have a nice, even, condensed granola bar that will be perfect for when we cut them up into nice sections. So this is going to make probably 18 to 20 good sized granola bars about that big that will be absolutely perfect for school lunches or snacks, especially since these are peanut free, which my kids love the peanut butter granola bars, but their schools, they have to be peanut free. So that's kind of the downside. But they're homemade, so they're better than anything you buy at the store.
And we could post a short on like
Yeah, well, we can post a short when they've set up of into the granola bar things because they are absolutely delicious. If you wanted to add another layer of deliciousness, you could melt a little bit of chocolate and drizzle them over the top. But I find that the mini chocolate chips melt in it and already like kind of give you that nice, rich, nice, delicious flavor. Okay, we've got our ham and cheddar melts are crisp up. So let me grab a plate. And so using our homemade, so this is on our homemade sourdough bread that we baked up. We used our Easter, some of our ham left over from our Easter dinner. It was like a brown sugar ham, but it is so juicy and tender. It will make for the best ham and cheddar melts. And here we're going to cut right into it. And you guys can see just how delicious we're going to be. So we've got our nice thick ham and cheddar melts. Took a little bit of that bread. Toasted. I love homemade sourdough. It just is so good toasted up. Well, guys, don't forget we also have our beautiful muffins that we made today. You can see the white chocolate chips and then the fresh raspberries. And we did use sourdough discard in it to make them. And the kids are going to be so excited for those because they love raspberries. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what we're making for our family, what we're eating, and then hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, all of our videos we upload to the link on our page, so you can always watch them and recreate the recipes there. Again, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe.